Let's get joined up. I'm Wayne Kelly, and this episode is sponsored by Picklock Publishing, the imprint behind my debut novel Safe Hands, which tells the story of Mickey Blake, a retired safecracker pulled out of retirement for one last job, and Hazel, a desperate mother driven to kill to protect her son from being sucked into a life of crime. It's out now to buy on Kindle and in paperback, and if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, you can read the book for free. That's Safe Hands by W.A. Kelly. Right, that's enough advertising. Cue the theme tune. Joined up writing. Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly, and it's episode 218 with the fascinating Manda Scott talking about her new Thrutopian novel, Any Human Power, why she wanted to take a different path between dystopia and utopia, how she literally felt a calling to write this book, and that all-important step of trying to find your voice. We do all of that, and we find time to talk about the book that saved her life as well. Before that, a very quick update from me. I've been splitting my time between the day job. In fact, I'm flying to Glasgow for a shoot shortly after this, actually. I've been also getting the words down on the next book, The Callback, and I've also been designing covers for a couple of other writers releasing books in the coming months. This is something I started after I got a few compliments on the cover of Safe Hands, which I designed myself, and now I've done a few for friends, and so I've decided to offer it as a service through my website. I've found there's a real need for help and support for some writers if they're new to indie publishing, because I think the importance of having the right cover for your book cannot be understated, both in terms of genre, but also obviously looking professional and as slick as possible. The genre thing is a really big thing, though. If somebody looks at your book and isn't sure whereabouts it should be on the bookshelf or what kind of book it is, they're probably not going to get interested in it. They're probably just going to scroll straight past it. So it is really, really important. It would be lovely to think that people don't judge a book by its cover, but unfortunately we all do, consciously or otherwise. And in addition to that, some first-time indie authors think they can just, throw the Word document onto Amazon and it'll be perfectly formatted and then magically sell thousands of copies. So I'm also offering professional book formatting, and I can design what Amazon calls the A+ content. That's the stuff that comes further down the page on an Amazon listing from the publisher. And that can be consistent with the overall book cover, and it can include blurbs and reviews and anything else you think is helpful to selling your book, and it improves your sales rank. So I've put all of that together into kind of an inexpensive little package, and you can find more info on that on my website if you're interested. If you're new to self-publishing and it's something that you're looking at, you're thinking of getting your book out there, take a look. That's at waynekellywrites.com, and I'll stick a link in the show notes as well. As well as that, I've decided to put a little extra pressure on myself with the writing of book 2. It's a bit scary, but I've made The Callback available to pre-order. I'm officially launching this weekend, but it'll be available now as you listen to this. If you want to really put the wind beneath my wings, you can pre-order the Kindle version of it now for the knockdown price of $1.99 or $2.99 if you're American. And the official release date is December the 30th. So now I have no excuses not to continue ploughing through this first draft and getting to the rewrites and then doing the beta readers and then my editor and all the rest of it. December might seem like a long time away, but there is lots to do, so wish me luck. And in addition to all of that, I'm preparing for the States of Independence event, which is happening in my hometown of Leicester this weekend. I'll be there with signed copies of Safe Hands, and I'm looking forward to meeting and chatting to lots of new readers, hopefully. So, yes, I'm busy, but there's always something new to do. Anyway, what about you? What have you been up to? Maybe you want me to mention your project or workshop or your book or anything else. Well, drop me a line and let me know, because, as you know, I do love to hear from you and I will always reply. You can do that by emailing wayne@waynekellyWrites.com, or you can drop me a line on the Facebook or my Twitter page or whatever. And also, if you sign up to my monthly newsletter at waynekellyWrites.com, you'll get a free book free ebook with 2 new crime stories, along with a monthly email about all the things I'm into: books, writing, podcasts, and occasionally TV and film recommendations as well. Only ever send once a month. I don't spam you or anything like that, so you can sign up for free if you like. Anyway, let's get on with the real reason you tuned in today. It's time for an interview with Manda Scott. So, born in Scotland, Manda was once a veterinary surgeon and is now a novelist, smallholder, contemporary shamanic trainer, and host of the international chart-topping Accidental Gods podcast. She's probably best known for the Boudica Dreaming series. She's been shortlisted for the Orange Prize, the Edgar and the Saltire Award, and she's won the McIlvanney Prize. With her wife, Faith Tilleray, she's co-creator of the Thrutopian Masterclass, and her new novel, Any Human Power, is a Thrutopian political thriller, which we'll be talking about and explaining in a minute, woven through with Boudica-style dreaming, a new mythos for a new reality, and it's out everywhere right now. So enjoy the chat, and I'll pop back at the end to wrap things up. Okay, Manda, thanks so much for joining me on Joined Up Writing. Really appreciate it. So just to start us off, why don't you just tell us, give us a sense of where you're speaking from and tell us how things are going in your world at the minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. It's such a pleasure and an honour to be here. So I'm in South Shropshire, which I have to say was not a place I knew existed until I met my wife. But she lived in North Shropshire, and yeah, she has kids and grandkids, so we couldn't move too far away. So I'm right in that edge place, very near the border with Wales.
Nice.
Which feels good, because I grew up in Scotland, and there's a kind of the devolved nations feel more like home. And it's lovely here, actually. We live on a small holding. We are incredibly privileged. And it's rained pretty much solidly since October, but this last week, the rain has dried up a little bit, and now I'm worrying that we haven't kept enough water to get us through the summer. But we'll see.
Always the joy and the challenges. Well, it sounds idyllic. It sounds very nice. I'm guessing it's a nice place to be creative and do some writing and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it really is. And it means that when I need a break, I can go out and, muck out or feed or go to the polytunnel and plant things. So there's always, trying to keep the small holding moving means there's always something to be done in the background. So when I need something to just pretend I'm really, really busy and have proper displacement, there's always something displaceable out there.
It's brilliant procrastination. It's perfect. Yeah. So why don't you tell us about your latest novel, Any Human Power?
Alrighty. I haven't found the very slick elevator pitch for this yet, because it's
always the
what they
part.
call is genre busting. So I used to write historical thrillers, and it was quite easy. I've discovered who Joan of Arc really is, or, let me tell you about the SOE and the Maquis and the amazing things in World War II, or even the Boudican books. This is who we were, this is who we could be. It was a clear narrative. So we're calling it a Thrutopian thriller. Also, I'm calling it a mytho-political thriller. The political bit arises because I am 100% convinced that we are heading for near-term human extinction, but there is still time to turn the bus. But it's going to take all of us. And my spiritual path is shamanic. I had a series of visions that we probably don't need to freak out your listeners with, but they were really explicit, and the book arose directly from them. And part of the understanding was why the many expletives deleted was I writing historical stuff, when what we need to see is pathways to a future that actually works, that are grounded in here and now. So we're calling it Thrutopian. Dystopian stuff is, it's got the endings that we all know where we're heading to, and we don't really need to see them, thank you very much, and it doesn't change people's behavior. Utopian is all very lovely, but you never see how you get there. And Thrutopian is we start here, exactly where we are, and we map a path forward to a future that, as far as I'm concerned, I want a future that I would be proud to leave to the generations that come after us. So it's that, but it's a political thriller. It hooks around a 14-year-old girl who sends a tweet, and the tweet I pretty much copied from an actual 12-year-old who sent an actual tweet that was deleted within half an hour. And this one in my fiction, it wasn't. It sparks a global movement, an intergenerational movement, but broadly a youth movement. And it begins to threaten the establishment. And the establishment fights back, as dirty as the establishment always is going to. And so the thriller is how do we navigate a path? If we are committed to peaceful change, which I think we have to be, the new paradigm has to be different. We have to emerge into a new system, and the old system is predicated on violence, and I don't think the new system can be for all kinds of philosophical, moral, and ethical reasons, and it's also just not going to work. So it has to be peaceful. How do you build it? How do you navigate politics? How do we create a total change in our governance system so that it actually works? How do we change economics, food systems? How do we change everything in our hypercomplex system and stay alive
Hmm.
and keep trust and build community while we know that there will be people inserted in who are trying to destroy it? So somebody said yesterday that what I was writing was complexity in action. And I was so happy because yes, that's true, but that's quite a hard concept for people who aren't steeped in complexity theory.
Hmm.
So it's quite a big book. It's also the mytho part comes out of the shamanic dreaming, and the primary character dies at the end of the first chapter, having made a promise. And we see her having to keep that promise, not able to go to wherever the dead go to next, and having limited agency in the lands of life, and yet having the facility to step into the void, split the timelines, see all the futures where we all crash and burn. And the implication, once one does that, is that if you are there, if you can see all the possible futures, there may be some in which you take agency that you can't see because that agency has not yet been taken. If you take it, then there may be avenues that you haven't seen where we don't crash and burn. And so she's trying to find ways forward to those. This is a very long-winded way to describe a book. It's
Almost
basically it's
like
a
a
thriller.
time,
There we go.
almost like a time machine. I know it's not that, but the same
Yeah,
sorts of ideas of knowing
for
something
sure.
and being able to go back and think about how you might change it if you could try different things and approach it differently. It's sort of like
Yeah.
that, isn't it?
But the back is now. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly that.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So obviously you obviously very passionate about a lot of these topics, and there are a lot of things that you care about in there. Why why fiction rather than non-fiction? What made you think actually fiction's a better way to do this? Was it because you'd got the experience in fiction? What was it?
Broadly. Yes, I have the experience in fiction. Also, people read thrillers. I might decide to read, a half a dozen really quite detailed tomes on all these things, but most people don't.
Hmm.
And the potential audience for this is much, much, much bigger. Also, it's not just about that. We are a storied species. Humanity, 300,000 years of evolution, and for most of it, we were sitting around campfires telling each other stories about ourselves and each other. And even now, most of our interactions, most of our actions are because we have told ourselves stories of how the world will be when we get the new job or the new partner or the new house or the new car or whatever it is.
Hmm.
We tell ourselves stories. And I think part of what we're lacking at the moment are stories of possibility, stories that change is possible. We have been told a lot there is no alternative, and it's manifestly untrue. And so the title of the book comes from Ursula Le Guin. It was 10 years ago at the Book Awards where she said, "We live in capitalism, its power seems unassailable, but then so did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings, and often the impetus to that comes from the art of writing." And then Amitav Ghosh in The Great Derangement, this was one of the things I read early on. He says, future generations looking back may well hold politicians and bureaucrats culpable for their failure to act in the Great Derangement. But they will probably hold writers and artists more culpable because it's not the job of politicians and bureaucrats to imagine different futures.
Hmm.
And I would say, if they were capable of imagining different futures and bringing them into being, they would not have their current jobs. The people who are there because they will not imagine different futures. So it's my job. I am a fiction writer. And nonfiction doesn't really do it in terms of what's it going to feel like. If I wake up in the morning and I'm at the edge of this inter becoming generative space, the emergence into something else where nothing is certain, what does it feel like and how did I get there? And what might it look like as I take the steps forward? That can, I think, can only be done in fiction.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And am I right in thinking that before Any Human Power, you'd kind of moved away from writing and you were maybe thinking, you were wondering whether you'd even write another novel before? I know
I
you got
was.
heavily into podcasting and lots of other things, as you mentioned, the
Exactly.
small holding different bits and pieces.
Yes.
So it must have been a pretty powerful idea for you want to come back.
Yes, exactly that. It's at the risk of losing a few of your listeners. The shamanic work is such that if you get a really clear instruction, my lifelong experience is you don't piss around going, yes, but why? Or no, that's going to be hard. You just get on and do it. And it was really, it was as plain text as anything I've ever had. Most of the stuff that comes in is kind of nudges and metaphors. And the stuff that led to Accidental Gods took me 18 months to work out whatever the heck it was I was being nudged to do. This was like, here, this, go and do it. Write this book now. So I was training to be a homeopath. I really did think that writing was too slow. I had the podcast. We could talk today. You could put it out tomorrow morning if you felt like
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And it's immediate. And the stuff that I'm talking about is this stuff of emergence at the into becoming edge, and it's obsoletely within weeks. I know that the book is going to be somewhat obsolete. We finished it in March, and we're releasing it end of May. That's as tight as it's humanly possible to get in a publishing cycle. And even so, my editors were, please don't change anything else. Please. I go, yes, but this is, this is here. We could do
Yeah.
this. And they go, no, no, make it for the next book. Please just leave it. Um, so even so, I still think most of the ideas are still current. I desperately wanted it to come out before a general election because it part of the book is, okay, a general election is called. What are we all going to do? We're going to do this. And here are the steps that we could take using the current system to create an actual governance system that actually works instead of the manifest nonsense that we have just now. And I want people to see that it's possible.
And did you find yourself, the idea aside, and as you say, that passion driving it, in terms of the actual writing, did you find yourself falling in love again with writing, or
I
was it?
did, actually. Yeah, I really did. I didn't stop writing because I didn't like writing. I stopped writing because I didn't think it was the most useful use of my time. And then suddenly it was. And you're a writer. It is the most fun in the world. Terry Pratchett said this years ago. It's the most fun anyone can have on their own. And I have to say, podcasting is a pretty darn close second.
Yeah.
But writing is just the flow states that you can get into writing are, for me, completely unique. There's nothing else like it. And it feels like an act of magic, genuine, out of nothing arises this whole cast of characters, this whole set of ideas, and it's so much fun. I'm just getting going on the second one now and remembering what it's like to have a blank page and just go. But there's something really inspiring about it. So yeah, I totally did fall back in love.
That's brilliant. Well, let's take a bit of a step backwards. Let's think about how you came to writing in the first place. What's your kind of earliest memories of writing?
Oh my goodness. I have a book, we'll put that in very big inverted commas, that I wrote when I was probably 10. Probably makes it a bit less, actually. So my mother ran a rehabilitation centre for birds of prey in Scotland. And this book is told from the perspective of the birds that were around at the time and what they were doing. And it's complete fiction and whatever. I mean, it's not good writing. Let us not ever pretend that anyone is going to publish this as some lost work. But I was a really geeky little kid. I was small, I was specky, I wasn't into boys. There wasn't a lot going for me in terms of what people were looking for in young girls in small town Scotland. And I just lived in the library, basically. And so books were my thing and and continued to be. And in the beginning when I actually started writing, I was a vet. So I had this bizarre idea that I would be able to do both together. I don't know how I ever thought that. But writing was going to be my part-time thing and I'd carry on and I'd, go down the line of the career path that I had, which obviously didn't last. But that's fine.
And then how did you kind of progress from there? At what point did you think, actually, this is what I really want to do? I mean, especially because if you were a vet, I mean, obviously that's a vocation in itself, and that's something that you'd have had to study for a long time to do that.
Mm,
At what
yeah.
point did you think, actually, writing and following these kinds of pursuits, this is more what I'm about, and this is what I want to do? And why was that?
4th of September 1992. It was my 30th birthday, so now you all know how old I am. And I was looking at, I had the career path and I loved it, but I was also an academic anaesthetist. And at that point, the only possible route was to take a PhD and then become increasingly academic. And I just looked at the people who'd done that. I don't want to do that. Now, now there are an infinite number of places in referral centers where I could go and happily anesthetize things for the rest of my life, but they didn't exist. And I just got to there has to be more to the world than this. And I just sat down and started the first book. Basically, it was slightly more complicated than that, but that's basically it. But it took until, so that was 92, it took until the turn of the millennium for me to actually give up the day job and have enough money to be able to write full time. And that was with the Boudica series. So the first four books, which were crime thrillers, were all written in the kind of interstitial spaces around a pretty full time job.
And tell me about that Boudica series. Tell me, why did you choose that genre, and why did you kind of find yourself writing like that initially?
We're back to my spiritual path is shamanic. And so I was writing crime thrillers, partly because I didn't really know much about genre and I didn't know I was writing crime thrillers in the first book. I just wrote something and I thought I needed something to carry a plot through. And hey, look, here's a body. What do we do? But quite quickly, I discovered that I could write them without doing too much research. And I didn't have time to do research. And then I got to the point where I did a trilogy and then I wrote a standalone No Good Deed. And then I thought, oh, I've got ideas for a sequel. And I was walking along thinking about the sequel to No Good Deed. And I had a lurcher at the time. And I'm going to assume you know what a lurcher is, and most of your listeners do. My American editors for quite a long time thought that a lurcher was a kind of homeless man. So
That just
I
followed
had
you
my
around.
bio at the time. Yeah, exactly. That said Manda Scott lives with two lurchers and too many cats. And I had to send them pictures. Anyway, my lurcher went off. I was walking along Newbury Heath and came back with a lactating hare. And hares are sacred to all the gods that I follow. And it meant that the young were there somewhere and they were going to die if I couldn't find them, and I didn't find them. And one of the things that you learn quite early on this path is the gods will whisper and then they will speak and then they will shout. And if they get to the point where they're shouting at you, you're going to wish you'd learned to listen sooner. So I went off and did a vision quest, which again, I'm assuming by now people know what that is, with the question, what do you want me to do? Because it's clearly not writing the next book, which is what I was thinking about. I should have seen her. I should have stopped her. And I was just off in the book and I didn't. So I was in quite a bit of crisis. And the answer came really quickly to write this series. And it wasn't totally out of the blue. I had made a commitment in ceremony N number of years before that I was going to write about our shamanic past, which was for us in the islands of Britain, was the Druidic cultures. But it was always going to be a long way off. When I was a good enough writer, which, as you know, you never are. So that was,
Yeah,
postponed over every
yeah.
foreseeable horizon. And I sat down by the tree and they went, okay, write them now. And I don't know, can't do that. So I spent a long time arguing, which also I tell my students now, don't argue. It's pointless. Um, and then I kind of got to the, okay, I will do this if it looks possible, but I'm just not sure it's possible because I'm a vet. I wasn't an archaeologist or an anthropologist or a historian or any of those things. And I went home and phoned the only person I knew who wrote historical stuff. She wrote historical crime novels and said, okay, how about it? And they said, no, you can't do this. Your publishers will not let you because you are a crime writer and they have branded you as that. And anyway, if there was enough to write about Boudica, I would already have done it. But I had made a promise underneath the tree. You don't undo those. That's an extremely unwise thing to do. So I had enough money to last about 2 months before I was going to have to go back to the day job full time. And the good thing about having been a vet at Cambridge University was I had access to the Cambridge Copyright Library. It's got everything.
Yeah.
I discovered very quickly there are more books on Roman military history than there were on veterinary anesthesia by several rows
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
library shelves. And so I had that. I had the anthropology library. I had the archaeologists. I had a bunch of people around who were just beginning to do living history, proper, practical archaeology. I went off and made a sword and went off to Butser and slept in a roundhouse, not at Butser, slept in a roundhouse in Wales. And so by the end of the month, I had a 23-page synopsis. And I'm sure all your listeners will know, mostly you write a paragraph. This is what it's going to be about, and you will love it, and that's fine. And actually, everybody knows it won't be remotely like the paragraph you've just written because
Mhm.
reasons. But I had to prove to myself and my agent, who was being really good, because I phoned up and said, that book that we actually said we'd write? I don't want to write it. I want to write something different. And she could have said, no, you can't. And instead she said, okay, whatever you want to write, you will have to pay back the money. That's a pity because I spent it. Not that it was very much. But that meant we had to sell this new idea for more.
Yeah.
And so I was extremely lucky that, because the publishers didn't want it, absolutely didn't want it. But I met someone at Crime Scene 2000, which was in London. So that's exactly when it was, June in London. And some lovely person in the audience said, what are you writing next? I was on a crime panel, and my editor of the publisher that didn't want it was in the audience. And I am petty enough that I said, I can write this, um, basically just to annoy her, which it did. And and then at Dead on Deansgate in September of that year, somebody came up again after a panel and said, how are you doing with Boudica? And I thought, well, actually, by now I've got 3 chapters in the synopsis. Would you like them? And she turned out to be commissioning editor at Transworld, and that was it. So it
Brilliant.
was incredibly fortunate that, and once I got onto it, then all the stars aligned and it went forward.
Yeah, fantastic. So what is it that you loved about, I mean, do you think you'll ever return to historical fiction, or do you
No.
think it's gone, it's literally in the
It's
past, it's
why
history?
would I write the past now? Yeah, we need to see the ways forward. I want everyone. I
Yeah.
want people writing crime thrillers, but they're predicated in the old system is dying. What does the new one look like? You can still write crime thrillers. I've just written a political thriller. You could write romances. You could write any genre you like, except possibly history,
Yeah.
unless the history is okay. Let's take a different path forward.
Yeah.
I just
Like an
think,
alternate history, maybe. Yeah.
yes, exactly. We don't have time now to write propaganda for the old system.
No.
So, as much as I love it, I have a full outline for a sequel to Treachery of Spies, and I would love to write it because I really liked the characters and it was a lot of fun. But there isn't time.
So if just in terms of your process, give us a sense of how your process works, your writing process. If you were to sit down to write a new book tomorrow, or start a new book, should I say, what would that look like tomorrow?
It depends if it's totally new, or if it's a sequel. So I am in the process of working out the sequel to Any Human Power. So
Mhm.
I do a lot of shamanic work, but let's leave that aside. The only time I do actual handwritten stuff is at that point. I sit down with an actual physical notebook and tell myself stories about the characters that I know, and just pull in what what is the foundation that I've laid. Where do I roughly think I want this to go? So I know I have an image in my head of a scene that's towards the end of the book, and a kind of a sense of an energetic arc to get there, but I have no idea who is going to get there, or why they might want to do it, or what the twists are, or any of those things. So I just write, I kind of free writing basically. And it's evolved from, I wrote an outline that was also a free writing thing and sent out to my agent. Go, here you go, 3 pages, and and already it is nothing like that at all. So so I need to evolve characters who feel alive to me, and in this case, I think more than the Boudica books or their own books, I wrote lots of series of multiple books, but I want people to be able to pick up any of these books without having to have read the ones before. And I think part of the process of books like this is you start off with very few characters. So Any Human Power starts off with Lan and Finn, 2 people. And gradually you get to know their families and their friends and the communities that they have, and then the community grows into the movement. And by the end, we've got quite a big cast of characters. And I want to go back to starting with not very many again, but not the same not very many.
Sure.
So that we're going to come in, and the characters we already know will then be acting in the landscapes of the people that we start with. At the moment, anyway, that's
So
the
you
plan.
can kind of slowly introduce the wider cast over
Yeah.
however many books. Have you got a plan? Well, obviously you loosely plan, but in your mind, how many books do you think you'll go with
I
this
think at least
series?
3, but because this is intended to be mapping out possibilities for the future, I don't honestly know. It could go on. I've also got Dreaming the Wounded Bear, which actually is partly a sequel to the Boudica books, but it's a dual timeline and the present day timeline. I've got the first 15,000 words of that and I stopped because I didn't really know where it was going. And now I know exactly where it needs to go. So, so I might stop and do that. And I have also the first 20,000 words issue of 2084. So just need time, really
You've got
time.
lots of stuff on the boil. So,
Yeah,
so character creation sounds like a big part of what you do. You like to
yeah,
start and know your characters first.
totally.
And have you got any particular exercises or things that you do that, or is it pretty much just off you
Mm.
go and it's free writing and you see what
Yeah,
comes out?
the latter. I wish I had some useful exercises for people, but I never do. I just have to get to know them as we go along. And this is another, I don't plot at all. When you're writing historical novels, obviously you have actual historical event. The Romans did invade Britain. We might argue about exactly where and how and why, but they definitely came
Hmm.
because we have archaeological proofs. So there are always hooks to hang things on. With something moving forward like this, everything is fiction. You can do whatever the heck you like. So I have to get to know the people. I have to get to know what motivates them, and then I just let them loose and see what happens, largely.
And then off you go. And do you
Yeah.
tend to find those? I mean, I know the book is in, well, at least at the beginning, I'm at the beginning of the book, but it's kind of first person, isn't it, initially?
Yes.
And
Yes.
do you tend to find when you're doing your free writing stuff, do you tend to find when you're kind of writing as these characters, is first person what you tend to go to? Do you think to get a kind of under the
It
skin or?
sometimes is, not always. And in the second book at the moment, it's there's a part of it in first person, but there's more in third person. And also tense. I really enjoy playing with tense. And this current one at the moment is present tense, but I don't know it's going to stay like that. Lan just turned up, and because I could have written her third person, but she felt like somebody I wanted to write first person. A lot of so the Boudica books are all third person, the Rome books, all of pretty much the last 20 years has been third person. But I wanted the immediacy of that, particularly because the one thing I knew about her was she was about to die. And I really wanted to immerse in that process with the extra closeness that first person gives you.
Get really close to them and do it like that.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit more. So you mentioned your shamanic stuff, and you talk. I know that you talk about lucid dreaming and things like that. How does that sort of play? I mean, obviously, it's quite key in how it's played in Any Human Power. It's obviously was a major impetus for you to write it. But is it part of your writing process in general? Would you say?
Mhm.
How does it kind of feed in? And just explain it for people. There'll be people that are listening to this that
Yes,
have no
absolutely.
idea what we're talking
No,
about.
and we have to keep it really tight. So shamanic practice, shamanic spirituality is the original spirituality of all humanity. 300,000 years of tribal living in which people are an integral part of the web of life. What Francis Weller calls an initiation culture, where we have periodic, episodic, contained encounters with death, where we discover who we are and discover how to ask for help and discover that that help is there. Relatively recently in human evolution, we have the trauma culture that is our culture that doesn't have those contained encounters with death. We don't have the elders, we don't have the land, we don't have the ancestors, we don't have the cultures to contain us. So shamanic practice is the spirituality of the initiation culture. It says, first of all, we are an integral part of the web of life, and the reality that we in the West perceive of as consensus reality, with 3 dimensions plus time, is a tiny, tiny part of all possible realities. And that with training, the shaman or the shamanic practitioner can step out of these realities into the infinite possibility of all time and all space of the other realities in order to ask for help. I would say I am a shamanic practitioner. I don't think anyone of Western upbringing who's socialized within a trauma culture can ever actually be a shaman. There's just a very, very big difference. But that doesn't mean that the tools of shamanic practice are not useful. I think they're incredibly useful and they shape all that I am and all that I do. So because they shape all that I am and all that I do, they obviously impact on my writing. And the whole process of this work is a continual process of coming back to balance on the knife edge of the present moment and ask for help. What do you want me to do just now? Okay, this. And then trying to listen cleanly, and obviously that's hard. And there's, as much as anybody else, there are sidetracks and avenues you go down. You end up ripping out 3 weeks worth of writing, going back to the last place that worked, because sometimes you get tired or you don't hear or it doesn't matter or whatever else. The Boudica books were written with this. And I got to the end of the Boudica books and went back and, okay, guys, what do you want me to write now? And they went, it doesn't really matter. You can write what you like. Because you need to be teaching the dreaming and that's where all our focus is. And I was, no, you need to tell me what to write. I can't do that on my own. No. Oh, heck. So I ended up writing Roman spy thrillers because I really enjoy spy stuff. And then after Into the Fire, Joan of Arc, and then the World War II, just because all my guys would go, no, it doesn't matter. Write whatever you want. So I wrote what was fun. And then this one is much more like, now you need to write this. Um, so so it's just about asking for help and dreaming with. So it's not quite lucid dreaming, but that's probably the closest analogy that we have. And it's mostly just get to know the characters well enough that they inhabit my dreams and I can ask them questions that aren't clouded by my conscious mind and my ego.
So it's kind of, I mean, as I say, but people, I mean, I, although I don't practice any of the things that you're talking about in terms of shamanic things or anything like that, I would say that a lot of writers have similar processes
Totally.
in the fact that, I
Yes.
mean, one of my probably best times, if you like, when I come up with new ideas or solve a plot problem or whatever, is often on waking. It's
Yeah.
literally in
Yeah.
those first moments when I'm not quite
Yes.
awake properly, or I'm just falling asleep
Yes.
sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep. And it's that
Yeah.
moment where I guess you're loose, aren't you? One
Yeah.
way, some people
Yes.
meditate. There are lots of different ways to kind of getting into this state.
Yeah.
But
Anything that
it's,
gets you past your head that's going,
that's
I don't
it.
know what
Yeah.
to do. I can't do this.
Yeah.
You have to get past
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Make
Absolutely, to
sure.
loosen up. So on a practical basis, how does your writing work on a day-to-day basis? How do you fit it around actual real life? Obviously, it sounds like you've got a busy life. You're doing all these things. You've got these
It's
practical things that you
hard.
do. Have you got like a
Yeah.
set? Do you think, right, I have to write at this time, or is it just
Well, I used to, and it doesn't work like that anymore, which is driving me crazy. But I used to also have a dog, and I used to get up, go out, and I used to have two dogs at one point, go out, big long walk with, and walking, I find it, and driving are ways of unhinging my thinking mind. It was always much easier to work out ideas and thoughts and what's driving the characters while I'm walking, and then come back and write it. And that for years, decades, was my writing structure. And now I've got a podcast to run, I've got Accidental Gods, I'm still teaching the dreaming. And what I have now is I try and block out all of Thursday and all of Friday, and I write on my calendar, do not book anything because you're writing. And inevitably, things get booked on because they're the only spaces in the day. And I hate it because I also would rather have some time each day, because I don't know about you, but if I don't write for a couple of days, it takes a long time to get back into it.
totally? Yeah.
So I'm really trying very hard to find a
Yeah.
way to do a
I
bit.
found it's almost because I always used to beat myself up about, oh, I've got to have a set amount of words, whether that's 1,000 words or whatever you want to decide that it is every day and all those kind of things. And then I found that actually a better goal for me is trying to write something
Yeah,
most days. Like it's not
exactly.
always every day because I've got a full-time job and everything else.
Right.
But if I can do it so that I'm sort of in touch with it, I don't want to go more than say 2 days
Yeah.
away from the novel because I'm exactly the same as you. You get back to it and you're like, where the
What's
hell
happening
was
in my life?
I? Who is this character? I can't remember what headspace I was in when I was writing it.
Yeah.
Because I do think flow state in general is a huge
Yeah.
part of writing. And
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody about this today, kind of the ebb and flow and how it's difficult to accept it. Sometimes you write because, well, I just need to keep writing. I need to keep adding words to the manuscript because I've got a deadline and whatever else it is. And you have to write flat sometimes. You sort of
Mm.
you just feel like you're just putting one foot in front of the other to get the words done.
Yep.
And then other days, it feels great. The world's, it just pops out and everything's absolutely is. And I think it's coming to terms with it and just accepting that it's a bit like that. I think is part
Yeah.
of the process. It is for me anyway, I
No,
find.
I think absolutely. And those flat bits, I think they're the bits that get rewritten.
Yeah.
And life comes into them but once you realize what actually needed to happen. But what you were doing was getting yourself from the top of one mountain to the top of the next one, not really understanding the landscape, but just enough so you could get an overview. And then you go, oh gosh, yes, okay, so now they need to be doing this, and scrap all that bunch of stuff and
Yeah.
write in what actually needs to happen. And that's when the flow happens, is when you've got that sense of, I know who's here and why they're here, and I
Yeah.
can just let the writing flow. And then it tells me things I didn't know, which is the
Yeah.
exciting bit, I think.
That's a great way of looking at it, actually, getting to the next mountain so you can see over it. That's a good way looking at it. And I think it's just accepting that, because it's first draft at the end of the day. You can always come back and edit it. And as you say, add
Yeah.
that life to it, or get rid of it if it's not very good, if you don't think it's very good when you get back to it. That's the way that
Definitely.
you can do it. So
Yeah.
in terms of books, you've mentioned, obviously, you read widely, and obviously lots of books have influenced any human power as well, in terms of things that you've read about and listened to and all the rest of it. But there's a segment on the show that I do that's called The Book That Saved Your Life. Now, obviously, that's a very grandiose term. It doesn't have to be literal. But if I said that to you, and it does, you can have more than one if you like. It doesn't have to be just one book. It can be something recent. It can be something from your childhood, whatever. But if I said that to you, what is it that comes to mind if I said that to you?
So there are two that I read very close together, and we are back in my childhood. And it was The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary Sutcliffe, which your older listeners will probably have read. And that was my first introduction to gods other than the Presbyterian God, of the places I grew up in. So for those who haven't heard it, the theory is that the Eagle of the Ninth has been lost, and the young man is going to rescue his father's honor by finding the eagle, because losing the eagle of a legion is means the legion is disbanded. Although she didn't quite get around to saying that. But anyway, and he goes north. It's incredibly, I reread it. I wrote a book called The Eagle of the Twelfth, because actually, in the end, historically, the Eagle of the Ninth was not lost. The Eagle of the Twelfth was lost and then rediscovered, which in writing terms is writing gold, because we don't know a huge amount about it other than those two facts, and it happened in Judea. And so there's this extraordinary colonialism and misogyny it, right through this book. But aged 9, I think, I did not see that. I just had this extraordinary excitement of this person going north of the Wolds, going into Scotland, which is where I lived, in the hunting for the eagle. And he goes to the tribe of the horned moon, no, the tribe of the seal people. And the priests of the horned moon god have definitely got the eagle, and they're not going to let them see it. And they go into their secret place, which is like a long barrow, and there's a goat skin curtain or door, and you never see behind the goat skin curtain. And I was just, I need to know what they do. This is how I access the old gods of the land. I have grown up, and I don't know why. I am totally not interested in any god that's younger than 10,000 years old. I just don't want to know. But I did want to know about these. And it's like, oh, all I have to do is find how to lift that curtain, and it's all there. And all my life has been spent basically lifting that curtain. And then my dad and my younger brother and dad took us to the Brochs, which are the ones we went to at Glenelg on the mainland opposite Skye. Big Paleolithic structures like a beehive, but they're double skinned, and at the bottom the cattle would be in winter, and then the bay roof, and then hay, and then corn, and they have 7 stories going up, and they're quite ruined. But there's a lot of them. Obviously, somebody was traveling around with a plan and telling people how to build these, and it was the most magical place I had ever been. My dad and my brother were there, kind of talking geology or archaeology or head-mindy stuff, and I was sitting there thinking, I can hear you, I can hear you, and they were whispering and they were talking, and it was like I could almost hear that these are the people of the Horn Moon God. I need to find this. And the rest of my life, as I said, has been spent. That book totally changed my life. And very soon after, the BBC did an extraordinary black and white version of The Last of the Mohicans, Philip Madoc as Magua
Yeah.
and people I don't remember otherwise. And I watched that, and then I was allowed to buy the book because I'd got a book token for my birthday, because what else would you give your little bookish kid? And everyone's going, no, that's too old. I begged, and they let me buy it, and it okay. There are entire. I didn't get that this is a historical thing and these people aren't alive anymore. I was like, okay, I need to meet these people. These are my people. They are still in touch with the gods, and the Horned Moon or otherwise. This is how I need to live. So when in the 80s some of the indigenous peoples from North America came across to teach the shamanic stuff, for it was a little window when they taught. Um, I was there. Right, this is me. I need to learn this.
So it
So
had a
yeah,
huge, those books had a huge impact on you then, it's fair to say.
totally, totally, yeah.
Absolutely. So going back to your writing. So in terms of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be really specific to writing, actually, it could just be creativity in general. But what would you say has been the best piece of creative advice that you've been given along the way, or something that just sticks out that you think, yeah, that's something that I kind of come
Yeah,
back
yeah,
to time and time again?
totally. Okay, so when I was a baby writer, when I was still a vet, I could only take 1 week in the year as holiday. And there was a local place that was a writing tutorial. It was kind of like Arvon, but it wasn't Arvon. So you go and you spend a week and you make your own food and you get very drunk on the Friday night with everybody and you have a tutor. And I went 2 years in a row, and the tutor, the first year was Faye Weldon and the second year was Terry Pratchett. I am
Wow.
thus the only person in the entire world who has DM'd, dungeon mastered, Dungeons and Dragons for Faye Weldon and Terry Pratchett.
Wow.
And they're both dead now, so no one's going to get this off me. So, because we played, I was a D&D geek, and I had my dice in my bag, and I would bring them out on the Friday night and go, "Do you want to play?" And they both went, "What's that?" And it was amazing. So, and Faye Weldon, first year, said, "Find your own voice." And I had no idea what a voice even was. But I went off to find out, and she was really, really helpful in a lot of other ways. She helped me. I wrote a TV script, and she got it in front of a producer. It didn't get made, but
Yeah,
she was
fantastic.
amazing. And then Terry was more prosaic. I don't remember him saying anything really specific, but he was really helpful about structure and how to tone things back that you don't. I think he didn't say it explicitly, but you don't need to spell everything out. You need to give people the shape of things and let them color in the detail for themselves in some places. Some places you need to be very, very detailed, but you can be more overarching at times, and that's okay. So
That's
those two together, but Find Your Voice was the big one from Faith. Faith, sorry.
what a great experience in general, though, to go on that and to, just happen to meet those two particular writers as
Exactly.
well.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah, totally inspiring.
Yeah, amazing. So as we kind of move towards wrapping things up, Manda, if you had the ability to go back to the start of your career or whatever, or maybe your teens or whenever it was, would you do anything differently? And if so, what? Or another way to look at it is, if you could go back and tell your younger self something,
Mm.
what would it be?
Okay. Okay, that makes because you saw the look of panic on my face. And interesting, in the shamanic world, we quite often go and visit our older self and say, "What, is there any advice you can give me?" And so I think actually, much as there were bits of my life where I was deeply, deeply unhappy, I wouldn't be the person. I wouldn't change anything. I would go back and say, "It's going to be okay, kiddo. You'll be all right. Just keep going and keep listening and keep asking for help and following the answers, and it will be okay."
That's good advice, yeah. Because as you say, most things happen for a reason anyway, and it's a sort of a chain reaction, and this leads
Yeah,
to that, to whatever. But
yeah.
it doesn't always feel like that when you're living it, does it?
No, if I don't know, the love of my life we hadn't split up, I'd probably still be a vet and
Yeah.
small town Plymouth or something. And I'm really happy doing what I'm doing. So it's cool.
That's brilliant. Well, as we kind of wrap things up, then just remind people, obviously, when the book is out and where they can find it, where they can find out about you as well on
Okay.
social media and everywhere
It's
else.
out on the 30th of May. I'm on Manda Scott, all one word, .co.uk, and you can find everything there. It's out in audio and it's on Kindle, all of those things, and in hardback. So wherever you get your books, that ideally isn't the giant vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity.
I
Find
wonder
find
who you're talking
somebody.
about.
Yeah, who could that possibly be? But on the other hand, as I'm sure all of your writers say, please put reviews slightly connected to the
Yeah.
giant vampire squid because that makes a huge difference. I discovered the other day that Waterstones pegs its buy-in to Amazon pre-orders,
Mm,
which
yeah.
is just incredibly sad, but also probably a sensible business model.
Yeah, it's kind of like I mean, I don't know where exactly it would be, but it's a bit like the fact that YouTube is the second biggest search engine after Google, and I should
Yeah.
imagine Amazon is in the top five
Yeah, I would
search
think.
engines as well
Yeah.
for the same reason.
But
So
if you
just
have
wanting
a
to read the
nice
stuff.
local bookstore, please go and buy it from them. And yes, it will cost a few quid more, but they will have a living as a result of that. This is a good
Exactly.
thing.
And what a lovely experience going in and doing that in the
Yes,
first place. Yeah,
absolutely.
totally agree.
Yes.
And you've got a great website, by the way. I checked it out earlier. It's a really
Oh,
nice
my
website.
wife
Yeah.
will be very happy she designed it.
Well,
She'll
it's
be
really good. Yeah,
extremely
it's a
happy.
really
Thank you.
nice website. Well, that's brilliant. Well, I'll put all of that stuff in the show notes anyway, Manda. But for now, thanks for
Thank you.
coming on Joined Up Writing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a joy and a pleasure.
Joined up writing.
There you go. Thanks again to Manda, and I'll put all of her links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk. That's it for this week, other than me reminding you to take a peek at my indie author package if that's what floats your boat and maybe you're thinking about getting your book out there, and you can do that over at waynekellyWrites.com, and to make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and that way you can have the show downloaded automatically every time one comes out. Also, remember to leave us a nice rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you're using, because it does help other people to find the show. And, just keep telling people about it. That would be marvellous. So, thanks for listening again this week. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.